I bullied my stepsister out of pain and refused to go on vacation unless things were fair. My own father arranged a babysitter for me, packed his bags, and left with his new family. A child should never have to learn that lesson. I was 11 years old when my father called a babysitter, loaded suitcases into the car, buckled my stepsister into the backseat, and drove to the airport without me. I stood in the living room window and watched his SUV pull out of the driveway. My stepsister Piper turned around in her seat and looked at me through the back window. She didn't wave. She just looked. And then they turned the corner and I was alone in a house with a woman named Mrs. Fenton who smelled like peppermint and kept asking if I wanted to play cards. I didn't want to play cards. I wanted my father to come back. He didn't come back for 9 days. I'm 26 now. I haven't lived with my father since I was 14. I see him twice a year. Christmas and his birthday. Sometimes not even that. We talk on the phone maybe once a month. Short calls. Surface level. How's work? Good. How's Margot? Good. How are the kids? Good. That's the whole conversation. Two people who share blood and nothing else. I need to tell this story because I've been carrying it for 15 years and it's getting heavier instead of lighter. And because both things are true at the same time. I was wrong for what I did. And my father was wrong for what he did. And those two truths don't cancel each other out. They just sit next to each other and make everything complicated. My parents divorced when I was 8. Mom and Dad. Straightforward. They told me together. Sitting room. Dad on one side. Mom on the other. Me in the middle. They said, "We love you. This isn't your fault. We're going to make sure you're okay." Standard script. Every divorced parent says it. Some of them mean it. Mine meant it at the time. Whether they followed through is a different story. Mom got primary custody. I stayed with her during the week. Dad got me every other weekend and Wednesday nights. Normal arrangement. I adjusted. Kids adjust. That's what adults tell themselves. Kids adjust. Like we're software that just needs a reboot. I didn't adjust. I performed adjustment. I said I was fine. I said the new schedule was cool. I said I didn't mind going back and forth. But every Sunday night when Dad dropped me off at Mom's, I'd go straight to my room and sit on my bed and feel something I didn't have a word for at 8 years old. I have a word for it now. Grief. I was grieving a family that still existed but not in the same house anymore. Dad met Margot within a year. She had a daughter from her previous marriage. Piper. She was 6 when I met her. I was 9. Margot was fine. She was polite. She tried. She bought me a gift the first time we met. A puzzle. I liked puzzles. Dad must have told her. I said, "Thank you." I didn't open it for 2 weeks. Piper was small. Quiet. Brown hair. Big eyes. She looked at me like I was fascinating, which I wasn't. I was a 9-year-old boy who didn't want to be at his father's new girlfriend's house sitting on a couch that smelled different than home. Dad and Margot got serious fast. Moved in together within 8 months. Engaged within a year. Married by the time I was 10. Everything happened at a speed I couldn't process. 1 year I had 2 parents in one house. 2 years later I had a stepmother and a stepsister and a new bedroom in a house I'd never slept in before. The new house was nice. Margot decorated it. Warm colors. Family photos on the wall. Photos of Dad and Margot. Photos of Piper. Photos of Dad and Piper. One photo of me from a barbecue. 1. In a house full of frames. I counted the photos every time I came over. 11 photos in the living room. 1 of me. I was in 9% of my father's displayed life. I did that math at 10 years old. Kids aren't supposed to calculate their percentage of a parent's love. But I did. Because the walls told a story and I wasn't really in it. Dad tried. I'll give him that. He tried to include me. He signed me up for the same soccer league as Piper. He planned weekends around things I liked. He'd say, "This is your weekend, buddy. What do you want to do?" But the trying felt like effort. Like I was a project he worked on every other weekend. Piper got him every day. I got him on a schedule. There's a difference between living with your father and visiting him. The visiting kid always knows they're the visiting kid. Piper and I were fine at first. She was 6. I was 9. She followed me around. Asked me questions. Wanted to play. I tolerated it. Not warmly. I wasn't mean. But I wasn't kind either. I was indifferent. Which to a 6-year-old who wants your approval is its own kind of cruelty. The jealousy started slow. The way it always starts. Not with a big moment. With small ones. Dad helping Piper with homework on a Tuesday. I wasn't there on Tuesdays. But he was there. For her. Every Tuesday. Dad at Piper's dance recital. He posted a video. Proud dad. Beaming. I'd had a basketball game the same month. He missed it. Schedule conflict. Margot's family was visiting. He said, "I'll catch the next one, buddy." He caught every one of Piper's recitals. Dad reading to Piper at bedtime. I know because I heard it through the wall. His voice. Low. Patient. Reading some story about a bunny. The same voice that used to read to me before everything changed. Now it read to someone else. Every night. While I heard it through drywall on the weekends I was there. The jealousy turned into resentment. And the resentment turned into behavior. And the behavior is the part I'm not proud of. I started being mean to Piper. Not physically. I never hit her. But I was cruel in the way children learn to be cruel when they're in pain and don't know how to say it. She showed me a drawing. A horse. She was 7. Proud of it. I said, horses don't look like that. She said, it's how I draw them. I said, it looks wrong. She put the drawing down and went to her room. She asked me to play a board game. I said, I don't play baby games. She said, it's not a baby game. I said, you're a baby. So yeah, it is. She made me a friendship bracelet at school. Brought it home. Held it out. She said, I made this for you. I looked at it. I said, I don't wear bracelets. She put it in her pocket and didn't mention it again. These moments. Each one small. Each one a cut. Each one me taking the pain I felt about my father and redirecting it at the easiest target. A little girl who just wanted her big stepbrother to like her. And I punished her for existing in the space I used to have. I'm not excusing it. I was a kid. I was in pain. But Piper was a kid too. And her pain didn't matter less because mine came first. It escalated when I was 11. Piper was 8. The incidents got worse. She was working on a science project. A volcano. Baking soda and vinegar. She'd been building it for a week. Painting it. Adding details. Little trees made from pipe cleaners. A sign that said Piper's Volcano with a smiley face. I walked past it in the garage. Looked at it. And I tipped it over. Not accidentally. I put my hand on it and pushed. The volcano cracked. The trees scattered. Paint smeared on the garage floor. Piper found it 20 minutes later. She screamed. Not at me. Just screamed. The way children scream when something they built is destroyed and they don't understand why. Margot came running. She saw the mess. She looked at me. I said, I didn't touch it. It fell. It didn't fall. She knew it didn't fall. I knew it didn't fall. But Dad wasn't there and Margot was afraid to discipline me because she was still the stepmother and stepmothers walk on eggshells around their husband's biological children. So she cleaned it up. She helped Piper rebuild it. And nobody said anything to me. I got away with it. And getting away with it made it worse. Because it confirmed what I already believed, that I could direct my pain at Piper and nobody would stop me. 2 weeks later. Piper had a birthday party. Turned 8. Margot decorated the whole house. Streamers. Balloons. A cake with a unicorn on it. Piper was happy. She was wearing a dress she'd picked out herself. Pink. With sparkles. During the party I told 3 of Piper's friends that Piper still wet the bed. She didn't. I made it up. I said it casually. Like gossip. 2 of the girls looked at Piper different after that. One of them whispered to another girl. Piper noticed. She asked me later what I told them. I said, nothing. She said, they're being weird with me. I said, maybe they just don't like you that much. She cried that night. I heard it through the wall. The same wall I heard Dad reading to her through. This time the sound coming through was sobbing. Because of something I did. I didn't feel good about it. I want to be clear about that. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a brief flash of something. Control maybe. Power. And then immediately I felt sick. But the sickness wasn't strong enough to stop me. Because the pain underneath it was stronger. And the pain kept saying, she has your dad every day. She has your dad's voice at bedtime. She has your dad's Tuesday homework help. She has his walls. His photos. His full-time presence. She has everything you lost. That's not Piper's fault. I knew that even then. At 11. I knew it wasn't her fault. But knowing something and feeling something are different countries and I was living in the wrong one. The vacation. Dad planned a family trip. Spring break. 10 days. Florida. Beach house. The whole family. Me. Dad. Margot. Piper. A real vacation. Except. The details. Dad and Margot had been planning it for months. I found out 2 weeks before. Not because they told me. Because Piper mentioned it. She said, I can't wait for Florida. Are you going to build sandcastles with me? I said, what Florida trip? She said, the spring break trip. Dad booked a house on the beach. I went to Dad. I said, you're taking a vacation and you didn't tell me. He said, I was going to tell you this weekend. We're going to Florida. Spring break. I already talked to your mom. She's fine with it. He already talked to Mom. He planned a vacation. Talked to my mother about it. Got approval. And told Piper before he told me. Because Piper lived there. Piper was part of the daily conversation. I was the weekend kid. The logistics kid. The kid you inform after the decisions are made. I said, when were you going to tell me? He said, this weekend. Buddy. I just finalized the dates. I said, Piper already knew. He paused. He said, she overheard Margot and me talking about it. We didn't tell her separately. Maybe that's true. Maybe Piper overheard. But it didn't matter. Because the result was the same. She knew first. She always knew first. She lived in the house where the plans were made. I visited the house after the plans were set. Something broke in me that week. Not the slow kind. The sudden kind. I decided I was done being the afterthought. Done being the kid who got informed. Done watching Piper get everything I lost. I told Dad I wasn't going unless things were fair. He said, what does fair mean? I said, it means I want my own room. Not sharing with Piper. He said, the house has 3 bedrooms. You'll have your own room. I said, I want to pick the activities. Not Piper. He said, we'll all pick together. I said, I don't want Margot telling me what to do the whole trip. He said, Margot is part of this family. She's not telling you what to do. She's parenting. I said, she's not my parent. Dad got quiet. He said, buddy. I know this is hard. But Margot is trying. Piper is trying. We're all trying. I need you to try too. I said, I've been trying for 3 years. You just don't notice because I only exist every other weekend. That landed. I saw it on his face. The flinch. Because it was true and he knew it. But instead of sitting with me. Instead of saying, you're right. I haven't been fair. Let me fix this. Instead of treating that moment as the cry for help it was. He got frustrated. He said, you know what? I'm tired of this attitude. Every time we try to do something as a family you make it about what's not fair. I need you to stop making everything a competition between you and Piper. I said, it's not a competition. She already won. He said, nobody won anything. This isn't a game. I said, then why does it feel like I'm losing? He didn't answer that. He walked away. And I went to my room and sat on the bed in a house that wasn't mine and stared at a wall with one photo of me on it. The week before the trip. Dad called Mom. I was at Mom's house. She hung up and came to my room. She sat on my bed and said, your dad called. He said you've been having a hard time and he thinks it might be better if you skip the Florida trip. Skip it. Not postpone. Not fix the problem. Skip it. I said, he doesn't want me to come. Mom said, he thinks you need some time. He said you've been struggling with the blended family and he wants to give you space. Space. The word adults use when they're choosing someone else but don't want to say it. I said, he's taking Piper. Mom was quiet. She said, yes. I said, he's replacing me with her. Mom said, nobody is replacing you. Your father loves you. He just thinks. I said, he thinks Piper is easier. Because she doesn't complain. Because she doesn't have opinions. Because she's just there. Every day. And I'm not. Mom held me. I cried. I was 11. I cried like I was 5. Because my father just told me through my mother that his new family was going on vacation and I wasn't invited. The morning they left. I was at Dad's house because the schedule overlapped. I was supposed to be picked up by Mom at noon. They were leaving at 8 a.m. Mrs. Fenton arrived at 7:30. A babysitter. An actual babysitter. Dad hired someone to watch me for 4 hours until Mom came. Because he couldn't wait. He couldn't overlap even 4 hours of his vacation departure with being my father. I stood in the living room. Backpacks by the door. Suitcases in the car. Margot was loading snacks. Piper was in her swimsuit already. Under her clothes. Ready. Dad came to me. He said, buddy. Mrs. Fenton is going to hang out with you until Mom comes. We'll bring you back something cool from Florida. I'll call you every day. I looked at him. I said, why can't I come? He said, we talked about this. I think a break will be good for everyone. Good for everyone. Everyone being him. Margot. Piper. The family that functioned better without the difficult child. He hugged me. I didn't hug back. He said, I love you. He picked up the last bag. Walked to the car. Margot waved at me from the passenger seat. A fake wave. The kind you give when you know you're part of the problem but don't want it on camera. Piper turned around in the backseat. Through the window. She looked at me. Not smiling. Not gloating. She looked sad. She looked like a kid who understood something bad was happening even if she didn't fully get what. They drove away. I stood at the window for 11 minutes. Mrs. Fenton came up behind me and said, sweetie, do you want to play cards? I said, no, thank you. I went to my room. The one photo on the wall. Me at a barbecue. Smiling. Holding a hot dog. I was 8 in that photo. Before Margot. Before Piper. Before I became the every other weekend kid. I took the photo off the wall. I put it face down on the desk. I sat on the bed and waited for my mother. Dad called from Florida. Day 1. He said, hey buddy. Miss you. The beach is great. I said, okay. He said, we'll FaceTime tomorrow so you can see the house. I said, okay. He FaceTimed the next day. I could see the beach behind him. Blue water. White sand. Piper was building a sandcastle in the background. He said, look at this place. I said, cool. He said, next time you're coming with us. I promise. I said, okay. I said okay 7 times during that trip. It was the only word I had. Because every other word I wanted to say would have made him hang up. And at 11. Even angry. Even abandoned. Even replaced. I still wanted my dad on the phone. He came back 9 days later. Tan. Relaxed. He brought me a shell. A big one. Pink and white. He said, found this on the beach and thought of you. He thought of me. On a beach. While I sat in my mother's house for 9 days knowing my father chose a vacation with his stepdaughter over being with his son. I took the shell. I said, thanks. I put it in a drawer. It's still there. I've never taken it out. Things changed after Florida. I changed. The anger didn't go away. It fossilized. It became something structural. Part of my personality. I stopped being mean to Piper. Not because I grew up. Because I stopped caring. I stopped caring about Piper. About Margot. About the house. About the photos on the wall. About all of it. I became the polite visitor. The kid who showed up every other weekend and said fine and ate dinner and went to his room and counted hours until mom picked him up. I stopped fighting for space because I'd learned the lesson my father taught me in that driveway. If you're difficult, you get left behind. If you express pain, you get replaced. If you ask for fairness, you get a babysitter. That lesson sat in my chest for years. Through middle school. Through high school. Through every relationship I've had since. Every time I feel something unfair happening, I go quiet. I don't speak up. I don't make demands. I don't say, this isn't right. Because an 11-year-old version of me is still standing in that window watching an SUV drive away and understanding for the first time that love has conditions. And the condition is, be easy. Be convenient. Don't make waves. Or they'll leave without you. Piper and I are fine now. We're not close. We don't talk much. But I apologized to her when I was 19. I drove to her college. Sat in her dorm room. I said, I was terrible to you and you didn't deserve any of it. You were a little kid. I was jealous and scared and I took it out on you because you were the only person smaller than me and I'm sorry. She cried. She said, I always knew you were hurting. Even then. I knew it wasn't about me. I just didn't know how to help you because I was 8. An 8-year-old knew I was in pain and didn't know how to help. My father was 40 and didn't know either. Or didn't try. Or tried and gave up. I'm not sure which is worse. She said, the Florida trip. I didn't want to go without you. I told Dad. I said, can we wait for him? He said, he needs time. I said, I don't think he needs time. I think he needs you. Dad didn't answer. He just started the car. I think he needs you. From an 8-year-old in the backseat. And my father started the car. I told Mom everything. Over the years. Pieces at a time. She listened. She never badmouthed Dad. But one night when I was 16 she said, your father is not a bad man. But he is a weak one. He chose the path that felt easier and told himself it was the path that was best. Those aren't always the same thing. And the child who suffers the difference between those two paths is always the one with the least power. I'm 26 now. I have a job. An apartment. A girlfriend named Sienna who knows about all of this because I told her on our 3rd date. Not because I wanted sympathy. Because I needed her to understand why I go quiet when I feel like I'm being left out. Why I don't ask for things. Why I say okay when I mean please don't go. She said, you were 11. He was your father. It was his job to figure out your pain. Not punish you for expressing it. A child who says things aren't fair isn't being difficult. They're being honest. And his response to your honesty was to leave you in a window with a babysitter. That's not parenting. That's quitting. Dad and I had a conversation last year. At Christmas. Margot's house. Piper was there. So were their 2 younger kids. The ones they had together. Felix and Anna. 6 and 4. The do-over kids. The ones Dad is fully present for. The way he was never fully present for me because I was the divided custody kid. The every other weekend kid. The logistical kid. I watched Dad with Felix at Christmas. On the floor. Building a train set. Patient. Laughing. Present. The same man. The same hands. A different version of fatherhood than the one he gave me. After dinner I said, Dad. Can we talk? We went to the porch. Cold. December. He had coffee. I had nothing. I said, I need to ask you something. And I need the real answer. He said, okay. I said, when you left for Florida without me, did you think about what that would do to me? He set his coffee down. He said, I thought about it. I told myself it was the right call. That you needed a reset. That the trip would be better without the tension. I said, The trip would be better without me. That's what you're saying. He said, that's not. I said, Dad. You hired a babysitter. You loaded the car. You buckled Piper in. And you drove away while I stood in the window. I was 11. And you left me. For a vacation. With a babysitter named Mrs. Fenton who smelled like peppermint and wanted to play cards. He was quiet. For a long time. He said, I didn't know what else to do. I said, you could have stayed. You could have canceled the trip. You could have said, my son is struggling and I'm going to sit with him until he's not. You could have chosen the hard thing. You chose the easy thing. You chose it every time. Every time I was difficult. Every time I needed something that required patience. You chose the path that didn't include me. He said, I thought I was giving you space. I said, I was 11. I didn't need space. I needed my father. I needed you to look at the kid who was being mean to Piper and ask why instead of punishing him for it. I was mean because I was in pain. And the pain was losing you. To Margot. To Piper. To the house with 11 photos and one of me. I was watching my father become someone else's full-time dad while I got every other weekend and a shell from a beach I wasn't allowed to visit. He put his hands on his face. He said, I'm sorry. I said, I know. But sorry doesn't give me back the trip. Or the Tuesdays. Or the bedtime stories through the wall. Or the 11-year-old who learned that love was conditional in a driveway while a babysitter asked if he wanted to play cards. He cried. I didn't. Not because I didn't feel it. Because I'd already cried it out. 15 years ago. In a window. Alone. I told him one more thing before I went inside. I said, Piper told me something. She said she told you on that trip that she thought I needed you. Not time. You. She was 8 and she could see it. I was 11 and I was screaming it. And you started the car anyway. He didn't respond. He just sat on the porch with his coffee going cold. I went inside. Felix ran up to me and said, Want to see my train? I said, yeah buddy. Show me. I got on the floor. Because that's what you do. You get on the floor. You get on the level of the child. You don't stand in the doorway. You don't arrange a babysitter. You don't drive away. I'm 26. I'm still learning that I'm allowed to ask for things without being left behind. I'm still unlearning the lesson my father taught me in that driveway. I'm still standing in a window sometimes. Metaphorically. Watching people leave and telling myself it must be something I did. It wasn't something I did. I was 11. I was in pain. I was mean to a little girl because nobody helped me with the thing that was breaking me. And instead of helping me, my father chose the easier family and called it space. Mrs. Fenton. Peppermint. Cards. My father drove to a beach with my replacement and left me with a stranger who didn't know my middle name. A child should never have to learn that love is conditional. I learned it at 11. In a window. Watching an SUV turn the corner. And the card game Mrs. Fenton offered me that morning is still the loneliest question anyone has ever asked me.